Welcome to another episode of the Urban Wall Street Project. I'm your host, Earl III, of course, and today I have a dynamic show with a thorough brother, architect, inventing. You ever thought about being an architect? You think you are an inventor? Well, my next guest, Mr. Earl S. is just that. He's an architect, an inventor, and he's going to bring a twist to it because there's a hip-hop generation. So hip-hop architecture is on the rise. You're going to learn about that. Without further ado, my guest, Mr. Earl Bell.
What's up, big brother?
Nice to see you. Nice to meet you. Finally, we done got it together.
Definitely.
You know, I know you came into my realm with the hip-hop architecture, and I checked it out. I said, hip-hop architecture, and we know it's much more vast than that, but that's nice, catchy for that urban generation.
Exactly.
So I'm going to give you an opportunity just to talk a little about who you are and this hip-hop architecture, and then we'll be going with the whole industrial aspect of hip-hop architecture.
Yeah. Actually, like, hip-hop or expressing hip-hop into the industrial arts, you know, like hip-hop architecture is a component of sort of expressing hip-hop in the industrial arts. But just like give a little bit of background into that whole kind of approach, like, you know, I'm under the impression that hip-hop in a sense is a part of the spectrum or the jazz spectrum, you know? So it's like thinking about the Harlem Renaissance till now, like what I'm doing with this expressing hip-hop into the industrial arts is taking the cultural capital or expressing the cultural capital of, you know, blacks or African Americans in the United States and expressing it in the industrial arts, industrial design, sculpture, architecture, and actually utilizing or using that to empower, you know, young generation and people who are actually now currently unemployed.
Right. And I know we're going to talk about that now. When did you know that this was your calling, you know, architecture and inventor? When did you know that, Earl?
Well, actually, my grandfather was he's still alive. He's a master carpenter. Okay. So I grew up watching him, you know, putting furniture together in the neighborhood, and I took to it ever since.
Now, I know you have some designs, and we're going to see some of those different things later, different images that we'll be able to fly in as we're talking, and people will be able to just recognize what's going on. But I really want to, you know, understand it, because when you introduced it to me, I was definitely, you know, intrigued, never heard about it, and I saw some of the sketches and designs, and I was like, yeah, that's a real cool situation. And particularly architecture, you know, I had a gentleman on the show, we did engineering and, you know, architecture, and certain occupations, you know, always strike me, because I think as a child, I used to like to draw, and architecture was something that my mother thought I would get into, but because of my inclination to draw. But I also know that architecture, you know, again, when I was in school, was one of those majors where you really had to be in it. You didn't really have the opportunity to just be you know, hanging out and kicking it, maybe like a communications major like myself. So architecture, was it a tough subject for you in school?
Well, architecture is sort of, you know, some people are under the impression that and I am also, architecture is sort of a lifestyle.
Okay.
You know, it's like you express yourself, like, you know, you observe the built environment around you. You know, like architecture is not, you don't necessarily have to even build a structure in order to be architecturally minded. It's sort of you know, a thought process or a methodology or how you go about doing things. You know, you could do theoretical work and, you know, be considered an architect.
Right.
So I'm from that kind of school of thought.
Now, in hip-hop, now, how do you see the hip architecture influence or affecting the hip-hop culture?
Yeah, that's quite interesting. You know, I think that when hip-hop evolves or hip-hop is evolving, hip-hop needs to sort of take on a new trajectory in the sense of not mimicking what took place in the last 30 years in terms of like the exploitation of the, you know, of our culture. When we evolve into the industrial arts and into architecture, I think we need to bring forth a new paradigm on how we monetize this expression. How do we industrialize this expression? You know, there's sort of like three components to, or three main tenets to industrializing jazz or industrializing hip hop. And that's, you have to design it and own the intellectual property. You have to manufacture it, and you have to have a major stake in the distribution. You know, I'm just like, want to set the bar high so these different types of exploitations that took place in the past don't happen when we begin to evolve our culture. So
now, individuals that want to learn about, you know, the industrial aspect of the architecture and the hip hop arena and realm, where do you say they could start? Where would they start, Earl?
Well, what do you mean in terms of?
Like, you know, somebody might just show them like, yo, I'm feeling that. Hip-hop architecture, I never even thought about it from that perspective. But they say, but what do I do next?
Well, you could actually go to Google and type in hiphoparchitecture.com, There's some content there. You could go to my website, www.earlsbell.com. But really, this sort of expression is like on a verge, or it's like on a cutting edge of essentially what's taking place is the transference of cultural capital into other forms of capital. You know, and it's like, I think this is really a part of a culture or civilization evolving and maturing and beginning to provide food, clothing, and shelter.
And now when you talk about providing, it's very important because off camera we were talking about, you know, the unemployment rate and things of the nature, and really, you know, some of the issues that are afflicting urban American communities, and whether the opportunities are coming from, you know, government or local, state, or just communal, people are struggling out there.
Exactly.
But you were talking about a concept, and I want you to expound upon that. What was the concept? It was,
well, you know, it's quite interesting that our culture has made inroads globally.
right.
And those are tracks that we can use to introduce to the world our industrial expressions. Now, when I say industrial expressions, I don't want to necessarily keep it in this theoretical realm. Like, just imagine if your car that you drive was manufactured in Brooklyn or the Bronx. It could be an electric car. It could run on another type of energy. The car could be, you know, it could be like manufactured and designed in Brooklyn from the people, you know, from the people in the neighborhood. Like that type of empowerment is what I'm saying the expression of hip hop and the expression of jazz into the industrial arts is. Not saying, okay, you know, you say like you're a rapper or you're a star and you place your name on top of a vehicle that's manufactured in another country somewhere. Like, what I'm saying is that, no, manufacture it. Do the background and do the background studying to how do you put together something, and, you know, take it from there. Like, what I actually have a design of hip hop expressing itself in industrial arts. It's a ramp that has speakers underneath, and I actually submitted a patent application. And what I would like to do with this is actually employ, you know, 200 to 300 to 400, you know, young adults in the neighborhood and give them, you know, an opportunity to learn this type of industrial expression.
Now, there's a whole nother, you know, area right there, this inventor. You know, it's not too many people, you know, that think they would ever probably meet. You know, you probably meet people that invent all the time, or invent small things or big things, but you just don't think. I'm surely in urban America, we're not thinking that that brother's an inventor and with a patent. When did you decide, you know, I want to invent and decide, you know, I want to go invent something, but not just something, you know, kind of cascade or light. I want to patent it because I believe it can really make something happen. What made you give you the confidence and insight to think that you have something that can be patented for a greater purpose?
You know, as a young man, I was like, you know, maybe 9 months old, 10 months old to a year. My father used to make small contraptions and sell it on the street, you know, and I saw that. And, you know, my grandfather, he was a carpenter, and what I would do is I would take washing machines, telephones into the junkyard across the street from White Cove Projects, downtown Brooklyn, New York City, and I would make things out of it.
Wow.
And from there, you know, I started to express myself in elementary school, PS 38, downtown Brooklyn, entering into science fairs. And it's like, you know, I didn't necessarily have a sophisticated understanding of science, but I had a love for tinkering. And I think like young kids around the city, wherever they may be, if you have that type of love, you know, express it, and you begin to intuitively understand how things go together in the physics of, you know, certain components, or even the physics of certain properties.
Now, we were talking earlier about, you know, just unemployment rate, you know, New York City, maybe among African Americans, between 14 and 20% potentially. And then we were talking about, you know, ways to, you know, evolve the hip hop community and urban community through architecture and industrial architecture. And you had I know you had a idea or a concept or a theory that you think we could implement. Would you want to share that?
Yeah.
Yes,
well,
sir.
With expressing our culture into the industrial arts, this will allow for employment. Like, again, I mean, hip hop already employs, you know, us, but when we, you know, do the full gamut of everything from inception to distribution, that within itself is a slew of different employment opportunities. You know, and if we stay on target and stay with that, then you begin to employ yourself. Like, just imagine if, you know, a new type of speaker, you know, was designed, you have the patent, or someone you know has a patent on it, you manufacture it and you sell it in Brazil, in Nigeria, in Russia. That is employment opportunity. And I think we need to start thinking on levels like that. Okay, how do we begin to do what these major corporations have done in terms of manufacturing and distributing and things like that.
So essentially put ourselves in positions of producers.
Exactly.
As opposed to just strictly consumers.
Exactly.
Right? Now, how do you feel, first of all, architect, what's some of the, the challenges? Because, with every occupation, I had engineering is challenging, whether it's communications, production, and, architecture, people want to go into it. It's definitely something you have to be diligent, and some people may get tired. What's some of the challenges and obstacles that you faced, in the earlier years of architecture and inventing that you overcame and made you stronger?
Well, there's certain institutions that teach architecture in a certain way, and it's very rigorous. And that was a big challenge, but I persevered. And also, when you graduate, you have to do an apprenticeship for a couple of years in order for you to sit for your license. But that entire process, and it's like the beautiful thing about architecture also is that you can work in an industry for about 12 years and still sit for the exam. So, but I subscribe to the notion that you can be an architect and not subscribe to the whole modern way of doing architecture. You could become a master builder on your own. And achieve, that level of architecture,
Okay.
or that expression of, respectable architecture.
Without question.
And
now, when it comes to patenting, everybody's heard of a patent, but I think a lot of young people may not know what that means. And the reason I say that, Earl, because I'm all about edutainment. That's the urban Walsh. You want to educate the younger generation and maybe the older generation, people that might they always thought I liked architecture, I want to get into it, but they didn't have the confidence or didn't have the support or didn't have the know-how where to start. And it seemed like as an architect, it's creativity. And inventor is creativity, so there's never really
exactly
an end point or a begin point.
Exactly.
You start when you start. But I want to say, how is it that, when it comes to architecture, what do you think some of your greatest accomplishments have been thus far? 'Cause I know you have so much more to do, but some of the things you're really proud of thus far.
Well, currently I've just came up with this design called Charge Plaza.
Charge Plaza.
Charge Plaza. If you go to www.chargeplaza.com, you can find out more information about it.
Okay.
But what Charge Plaza allows is for the residents of a particular municipality to be able to produce electricity and to also learn in the same vicinity. And what Charge Plaza does is it utilizes energy from the sun, and there's also a component where there's an electric bicycle that has a detachable back rim. And this rim, you can, let's say, for example, like you're riding around a city. In the process of you riding around the city, you can produce electricity.
Okay.
With this back wheel, this detachable back wheel. And then say you go back to the Charge Plaza, now these units that you built up can actually be forms of currency, and you can transfer that for, say, a meal. Or also the Charge Plaza has a component of a bookless library.
So does it harnesses energy?
Well, it's sort of going back to the whole Nikola Tesla model of energy as something that you can produce freely.
Okay.
And I'm tying this into the whole aspect or the whole approach of a bookless library. You know that there's Kindles out now.
Right.
And this actually allows for infinite possibilities. So what I'm saying is that, okay, let's make energy and information more accessible to the masses or to the, the people in the community.
What made you come up with that idea? Did this creation hit you as an epiphany? Was it something that hit you 2 in the morning? You woke up like, wait a minute, Charge Plaza.
Man, that's a beautiful question, because sometimes like people may be under the perception that a spark of genius comes about.
Right.
You just like that, like a flash of lightning.
Right.
But more often than not, it's really a incubational kind of long gestation period of you think about something and you have like fragmented ideas in the back of your mind, and then they come together. So Charge Plaza was actually, a couple of years of just thinking about how can things be done a little differently.
Okay. Now, once you had the concept, Charge Plaza, because I tell all young people before it's a product, it's an idea. So the idea is much more, to me, it's much greater than the product, because the product can be broken, but the idea is forever. So when you come up with the idea, Charge Plaza, now I need to get someone else to feel my idea. So you bring this to someone, you introduce somebody. What was the reception like, or I should say, how was the interpretation when you let people know about it? Maybe sponsors or potential investors, or if that be the case?
Well, it's kind of mixed. Like when you take on a path of trying to bring forth new technology, sometimes it's rejected. And I think it's very important when you find yourself to be a visionary or an inventor, you have to persevere.
Very important.
You know, and I guess that's a given.
Yes.
So with Charge Plaza, a lot of people, you know, majority of people, you know, they really appreciated it and they thought, yo, this is the future.
Right.
You know, and there's some people who may not have a comment on it because they may not necessarily want to deal with it at the moment, or they may be invested in current infrastructure and it may not be wise for them to, you know, jump on that type of approach.
Now, when you look at, I know it's business and people investing, or they want to get behind a product and they look at, you know, what's in it for me? How is money made? How is revenue generated? Is it something that you sell? Is it something that people buy? Is it something that's franchised? Is it a device like a modem?
Well, you know, well, one of the major aspects of Charge Plaza, I know we were speaking about hip hop architecture, but the Charge Plaza is, you know, part of this whole green movement of, you know, like sustainably producing electricity and also sustainably producing architecture and industrial design. Well, with Charge Plaza, at the base of it, as you can see with the renderings, at the base of it, it's essentially a area where cars are charged, electric cars are charged.
Okay.
So at Charge Plaza, at the base of the actual structure that you see now, the Charge Plaza has a charging facility for cars as well as a showroom where people can see, you know, new technologies. And the aspect of it that, you know, where you think about profit is, this is a place where you can showcase, say, inventions and green designs that are produced around the city. Now, so it's like a showroom.
So then we talk about green, and green is definitely applicable to architecture in these days. I'm sure a lot of individuals and companies are seeking and to develop infrastructures or developing blueprints that would represent, you know, a more green environment. How is hip-hop architecture influenced or how does it influence or influenced by this whole green movement that's going on?
Well, it's quite interesting. You know, I have a slew of inventions that's dealing with expressing hip-hop and jazz into the industrial arts.
So you have a few inventions?
Yes.
Okay.
But one of the actual interesting aspects is you know, the utilization, or not necessarily utilization, but the transportation around New York City. Like, how can we make a different form of transportation, say subways and buses and things like that? You know, and what I'm saying is that we should express hip-hop, we should express jazz, we should express these types of expressions, because I don't think it's necessarily only a musical art form.
Right.
We express these things into the way we actually traverse the city. So just imagine a subway car that could actually traverse tracks around New York City or around any metropolitan city around the world that could actually go into, say, like the Gowanus Canal. Now, this seems like science fiction.
Right.
But a lot of, you know, industrial designs and a lot of new technology start that way.
True.
So someone may say, okay, how does that relate to hip-hop? Well, you remember back in the days we used to tag on the side of the trains.
Exactly.
You know, it's similar, like a sort of culture that's in motion. You know, I think we shouldn't limit ourselves as to how we can express ourselves. You know, we can take the entire urban environment and redesign it for our own needs.
Now, this fusion of hip-hop and architecture and industrial, what do you think some great things that can be born from that synergy?
Well, one of the things that can be born from this fusion is the main thing, you know, in terms of back to the employment rate.
Right.
We have the ability to employ ourselves and make a good living. And
now, how important is it to you, in your opinion, that we're able to employ ourselves in this particular time that we're living in?
I think there are major changes taking place in you know, in the economy, as well as you know, the job market, and I think it's about that time for us to start thinking ahead. You know, start being preemptive.
Now, you know, most things, you know, whether you want to get into engineering, architecture, music, journalism, there's always some cost involved. Is there a overhead? Because, you know, you think when you get an architect, someone said, architect, I need money to build a blueprint. Is there an overhead or a monetary amount someone thinks they need to have or be in possession of if they want to get into the hip-hop architectural area?
You know, like that's a very interesting question. And I think that ultimately the true wealth is one's creativity.
True that. I can believe that.
And if you hone your own creativity, the money will come. You know? So I don't know if I answered your question correctly, but
really, I mean, sometimes it's very simple, and it is just like that, creativity. And that's what I said to people. And I told kids, listen, people look at, you know, the product. Oh, this product is selling so much, whether it's water, whether it's a shoe, whether it's a sneaker, whether it's a coat, whether it's a movie or book. But I tell everybody, before it was any of those things, whether it's a multi-million-dollar project or multi-billion-dollar corporation, it was an idea. And your idea is your creativity. So yes, if you recognize that your ideas are what generates great things, then your wealth is already contained therein.
Exactly.
You know?
And then it's just the next step of how do you monetize it.
Right. So young people. So how can we get young people involved, Earl? Have you spoken to do you speak to young people about this, you know, the new wave that you're bringing in and the future of the technology that you have, and what's their thoughts?
Well, actually, I get a lot of students who are maybe first year, second year, third year, and even MIT graduates asking about what is hip hop architecture? How do you express jazz into the built environment, into industrial design? You know, and the kind of feedback that I'm getting from, you know, everything from the kids who are in, you know, the streets in downtown Brooklyn, because I make a big effort not to detach myself. Right. You know, I stay a fixture in a neighborhood, and you know, when I speak about these things of, yo, you can actually, you know, produce, or you can actually take this musical art form that you have, you can take the sophistication of freestyling and express it into physical forms, express it into sculpture, and express it into these types of things. And you know, the kids, they love hearing that.
Yeah. And I'm sorry. So are there now? I remember looking at went to your site once when we first you know, connected about 2 years ago, and you had a image. I guess maybe it was like what it would be. There were, I guess, 2 buildings. It was in Brooklyn, and there was an empty plot right there, and you had like how this building would look right here. And it was a nice looking design. Is it your goal to actually maybe have buildings that represent the hip hop architectural, how should I say, genre?
Exactly, exactly. And you know, it's interesting that you say genre. You know, I don't want this to necessarily, or I don't think this should necessarily be, you know, an artificial sort of edifice placed on hip hop. Right. You know, it's like one of the reasons, to be straight up, like I went back to Wyckoff Projects to feel the essence and the metaphysics of the actual places that produced jazz, that produced hip hop. You know, to actually express it authentically, and to get to respond to your question. What was your question again?
Yeah, I don't know, brother. You know, let me see. What was my question? The question was the synergy. You know, we got the hip hop, we have architecture, we have this industrial, and I guess I was asking, you know, how do you think it's going to, you know, what can be born from it? You know, what type of things are going to be born from it? What type of developments can come from it? Because the reality is, when you see, like I said, you see your building, and I saw it, I'm like, that's cool, the architecture. So the goal was to have these type of buildings up. Now, do you think, this is my question I want to ask, because, you know, everything's a course now, and this may be a sidebar or digression, but it might help me with the last question. You know, it's always about, you know, you got to learn from somebody before you. Some kids see about hip-hop architecture, they want to get more information. They may not find a plethora of it. If hip-hop architecture was a course in college, what type of, how should I say, what would be on the syllabus?
Oh, that's such an interesting question. And, you know, I think first and foremost, the college itself needs to be a college that has a certain objective in mind in terms of having the best interests of the community. You know, and in regards to the syllabus of, you know, how do you actually teach hip-hop architecture is really how do you really instill certain values in a particular student of how do you design something, how do you actually manufacture it, and how do you distribute it. You know, having like a sort of an entire holistic approach to how do you bring about something.
And if somebody said, okay, I'm in this course, what would you think an ideal internship would be for a hip-hop architecture student? An ideal internship.
You know that's quite interesting. There's like hundreds of trades in New York City with people who don't actually have a job right now. Right. And I think these trades in itself can actually be courses, you know, for people who want to get into this type of expression. Now, when I say school, I don't see school as this building. Right. You know, I see school as, okay, you're learning the craft and you're helping produce, you know, it's, imagine like back in a Renaissance and even in ancient Egypt, but in a Renaissance where you would have a bottega, a small studio where you would have a sculptor and then 3 feet next to him, you would have a painter, and then you'd have another artist, and they're all producing this amazing art and this, you know, this sort of engine of creativity, you know, and I think that kind of, you know, working environment is what can actually bring about that interesting dynamism that actually, you know, Kool Herc back in the day when how he fused certain aspects of hip-hop together. The same kind of fusion, same kind of, you know.
I love it, man. I love the creativity. I love the inventive mind. Listen, man, 30 seconds before we get out of here. One last thing you want to let the audience know, want to share with them about what you do and where you're headed with it.
Well, one thing I'd like to say to, you know, the viewers is that anytime you have an idea or anytime you have an insight, write it down, put a date next to it, and make sure that you save it. Because you never know, like 10 years or 5 years down the line, you may have an opportunity to actually develop it. You know what I'm saying? It's like when you have a concept and you feel like you want to be an inventor, just never give up, because it's going to come a time where you may be ahead of your time. You may be 5 years, you may be 10 years, you may be 15 to 30 years ahead of what the industry is doing now. But if you persevere, you're bound to break through.
I love it. My people, I hope you've enjoyed it. Hip-hop architecture industry. We are beautiful people. We have great culture. We're fusing things and making things happen. I hope you learned something. Check out Earl Bell's website, Hip-Hop Architecture. Look into it. If you think that's what you want to get involved in, you like jazz, you like music, you like creativity, that might be the industry for you. As always, you've been watching the Urban Wall Street Project. In closing, be mindful, be prosperous, keep your head up, stay focused. Until next time.